The lake didn't look dangerous until you understood what darkness did to ice. In daylight, it was honest, wide, pale, and blunt. It showed you the old dock timbers, the empty slips, the ridgeline of pines crouched along the shore like watchmen with their collars turned up against the wind. You could see where the season had taken the water and locked it into place. You could measure the cold by the way your breath came out in short white bursts and vanished too quickly. But tonight the lake was a mouth. The town of Pine Creek sat at its edge, a handful of streets and a main road that cut past the waterfront before climbing into the hills. Usually, this time of year, the place glowed. Porch lights, neon signs, the warm rectangles of windows that told you families were inside pretending winter wasn't outside scratching at the door. Tonight there was none of that. A blackout had rolled through just after sundown. One moment the street lamps had been on, the next the world had been erased into a hard, featureless dark. The power company would call it an ice event. The locals would call it the lake taking what it wants. Officer Ethan Cole called it opportunity, just not the kind he liked. He cruised the waterfront road at 15 miles an hour, slower than the posted speed and slower than the part of his mind that hated moving slowly when visibility was bad. The patrol SUV's headlights carved a narrow tunnel through drifting snow. Wind came off the lake in flat, sharp sheets, the kind that cut through layers and found skin no matter what you wore. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, not because he was nervous, but because it kept him honest. Control wasn't an emotion for him. It was a habit, a discipline that had been hammered into place over years of work and loss and long nights with too much silence. The radio was quiet. The whole town was quiet. Even the usual distant hum of refrigeration units and generators was missing. There were no easy sounds to tell you where people were, which meant the darkness could hide anything. And then, as the SUV's beams swept across the shoreline, Ethan saw something that didn't belong. At first it looked like driftwood caught on the edge of the dock, dark shape, low to the boards, barely moving. Then the shape lifted its head. Two eyes caught the light and reflected back in an amber flash that made Ethan's stomach tighten. He braked gently, no sudden movements on a road like this, and rolled to a stop beside the marina entrance. The gate stood open, chain cut clean. The sign above it, Pine Creek Marina, creaked on its bolts, the letters half buried in frost. Ethan killed the engine. The sudden silence landed heavy. His own breath was loud in the cab. He sat there for a moment, still, watching the dock through the windshield. The shape didn't run. It didn't bark. It didn't do anything that screamed stray dog. It just watched him with the kind of stillness that meant training. Ethan opened the door and the wind hit him like a slap. Snow laced the air, stinging his cheeks. His boots hit the packed slush with a crunch that sounded too loud in the blackout. He stepped through the open gate, flashlight in his left hand, right hand free, but ready. Not for a weapon. He didn't want a gun in this scenario, but for quick reaction. The dock was a long finger reaching into the lake. The planks were slick with a glaze of ice. Halfway down, the boards dipped slightly where winter had warped them, and the water below made faint, dull sounds. Little shifts, little groans. The kind of noises that told you the lake was awake. Ethan advanced carefully, beam low, scanning. That was when he saw the chain. It was heavy gauge, industrial. Wrapped around a cleat at the dock's edge, looped through a collar at the dog's neck, secured with a padlock that gleamed wetly under the flashlight. Not a cheap chain from a yard store, not something a kid used to keep a dog from chasing deer. This was something someone used to make a point. The German shepherd lay with his body angled toward the cleat, as if he'd fought the chain until exhaustion took him. His coat was black and tan under the ice crust, thick fur clumped in frozen ridges. His chest rose shallowly. One ear twitched at Ethan's approach, but he didn't try to lunge or flee. He was too cold for that. Ethan stopped 3 feet away and crouched slowly, lowering himself until he was level with the dog's eyes. "Hey," he said, voice low, not soft exactly, controlled. "Easy." The dog's gaze held him, not wild, not vacant, intelligent. There was a strip of duct tape stuck along the dog's muzzle, half torn away, adhesive rimed with frost. Whoever had put it there hadn't done it gently. Ethan's jaw tightened. He reached into his pocket for his multi-tool, standard kit, the kind he carried because being unprepared annoyed him like a physical itch. He didn't move toward the collar yet. He let the dog see his hands, see the tool. Let him understand. The shepherd's breath came in faint puffs. A quiet whine pushed past the torn tape, almost soundless. It wasn't fear, it was pain and cold, reduced to the smallest possible expression. Ethan shifted his flashlight to his shoulder, beam angled away from the dog's face. He leaned toward the padlock, the cold biting through his gloves. The lock was a good one. Of course it was. He wedged the tool into the lock's shackle and applied pressure. Metal protested. The wind howled, the dock shuddered beneath his weight, and Ethan found himself suddenly aware of what the lake would do if the boards gave way. Not to him, to the dog, chained to a cleat. Too heavy to swim well in ice water, too exhausted to fight. Someone hadn't just tried to get rid of an animal, they'd tried to ensure he couldn't be found alive. Ethan pushed harder. The shackle snapped with a clean metallic pop that felt like victory and rage combined. The chain fell slack. The dog didn't move at first, as if his body didn't believe it was allowed to. Then he shifted, dragging himself forward on stiff limbs. He rose slowly, wincing, and Ethan saw the way his back leg trembled under him, paw splayed slightly wrong. Injury, not fresh maybe, but aggravated by the cold. "Come on," Ethan murmured. He reached toward the duct tape with 2 fingers. "Careful. I'm taking this off." The shepherd didn't resist. He held still, eyes locked on Ethan as if trying to read the truth in him. Ethan peeled the tape away. The dog's muzzle was raw beneath it, red and angry, whiskers ripped out in places. The shepherd licked once, then exhaled, a long, shaky breath that sounded almost like relief. Ethan didn't like what he felt in his chest. Not pity, responsibility. Because responsibility meant you couldn't walk away and pretend you hadn't seen something. Ethan shrugged his coat off and draped it over the dog's shoulders. The dog flinched at the contact, then leaned into the warmth. "You're coming with me," Ethan said. "No argument." The shepherd huffed, low, not defiant, almost agreement. Ethan guided him down the dock, hand under the collar, steadying him as the planks creaked. Twice the dog stumbled and Ethan caught him before he went down, feeling the dog's weight, solid, working dog heavy even under starvation and cold. At the gate, Ethan glanced back at the lake. The ice below the dock had fractured into thin lines that spread outward like veins. A slow warning. He looked at the dog again and felt anger sharpen into focus. Whoever did this didn't just deserve to be caught, they deserved to be exposed. He got the dog into the back of the SUV, seats folded down. The shepherd curled immediately, trembling, trying to conserve heat. Ethan turned the heater on full blast and headed for the only place that would be open despite the blackout. Pine Creek Animal Care, Dr. Lena Moore's clinic. Sat near the edge of town, backed up against a stand of trees that creaked in the wind. The building had its own generator. Lena was the kind of person who planned for disaster because she'd seen what happened when you didn't. As Ethan pulled in, the clinic windows glowed warm and steady. It looked like a promise in a town that had gone dark. He carried the dog inside, not scooping him like a puppy, but cradling him with the careful strength of someone used to carrying people who couldn't carry themselves. The shepherd's head rested briefly against his shoulder, heavy and trusting in a way that made Ethan's throat tighten. The door chimed. Warm air and the smell of antiseptic hit him. Lena appeared from the back with a flashlight in one hand and a stethoscope looped around her neck, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She took one look at the dog and her face changed. Professional calm, tightening into anger. "Ethan," she said, voice flat, "what did you drag in here?" "Not something," Ethan replied. "Someone." Lena's eyes flicked to the dog's raw muzzle, the frost on his coat, the way his leg hung slightly wrong. She set her flashlight down and moved fast. "Table," she ordered. Ethan laid the dog on the exam table. The shepherd growled once, a low warning that faded quickly into a whine. Lena didn't flinch. She had the kind of steady presence that didn't need permission from animals to do her job. "I'm going to check him," she said, more to the dog than to Ethan. "You can bite me if you want, but I'm still saving you." The shepherd's ears twitched. His eyes tracked her hands. Lena palpated the leg gently, then checked gums, eyes, chest. Her hands were cold but sure, moving with practiced speed. "Hypothermia," she said. "Moderate? Dehydrated? And this leg, he's been limping for a while. There's swelling, maybe ligament damage, maybe a hairline fracture, and his muzzle, Her voice sharpened. Someone taped him shut. Ethan felt his fist close without him deciding it. Lena looked at him. Where did you find him? Chained to the dock, Ethan said. In a blackout. Somebody wanted the lake to finish the job. Lena's jaw worked. She reached for a syringe and drew something from a vial. Sedation, she said. Just enough. He's been through too much and his body's burning itself to stay alive. She injected the dog and watched him carefully. The shepherd's eyes stayed on Ethan as the medication took hold. Even as his lids drooped, he didn't look away, as if letting go of consciousness was a risk he didn't want to take unless Ethan stayed put. Ethan stayed. Lena wrapped him in warm blankets, slid heating pads underneath, started an IV. Then she reached for the microchip scanner. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. Most dogs had chips now. It was routine. The scanner beeped. Lena froze. Not the small pause of a clinician reading a number. A full stop, shoulders stiffening, breath catching. She turned the scanner screen toward herself, then toward Ethan. Her eyes lifted. This isn't just a pet chip. Ethan stepped closer. What is it? Lena swallowed once. It's a state K9 registry ID. She tapped the screen, pulling up the database on her laptop. The generator hummed under the floor, steady and ominous. A file opened, and the words at the top of the record punched straight through Ethan's fatigue. Status, disposed, case, evidence support. Ethan stared. Disposed? Lena's fingers moved quickly. She scrolled, reading. Her face tightened. This dog, she said slowly, was assigned as an evidence K9 on an arson investigation 3 years ago. Family dead, house fire. It says he was dead commissioned. She paused, disbelief turning her voice sharp, after an internal report labeled him aggressive and unreliable. Ethan looked down at the dog on the table. Aggressive wasn't what he'd seen on that dock. He'd seen endurance, discipline, and the kind of eye contact you only got from working dogs. Lena continued, quieter now. Then the record was sealed, and after that, the dog was listed as disposed, with no adoption notes, no transfer, no euthanasia certificate attached. Just gone. Ethan felt cold spread through him that had nothing to do with weather. Why would they seal it? He asked. Lena met his eyes. Because somebody didn't want questions. Ethan's mind moved the way it always did when the world tried to hand him chaos. It broke things into pieces he could carry. Blackout, dock, chain, tape, sealed case, disposed, K9. A town small enough that secrets could breathe right next to you. He exhaled slowly. Can you print that file? Lena nodded once. Yes. And can you tell me his name? Lena looked back at the record, then down at the dog. It lists him as Shadow. Ethan repeated it like a test. Shadow. The shepherd's ear twitched at the sound, even sedated, even exhausted. Recognition. Ethan leaned in slightly. Shadow, he said again, softer. The dog's eyes opened a fraction, amber gaze finding Ethan's. A slow blink, not a pet dog's blink. A working dog's acknowledgement. Ethan straightened. I need to talk to Captain Hayes. Lena paused. In the middle of a blackout? Ethan's mouth tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. Especially in the middle of a blackout. Captain Maria Hayes answered on the second ring, voice crisp even through static. Cole, she said, if this is about the power outage, I already— It's not, Ethan cut in. He kept his voice calm because panic was contagious, and he didn't spread it. I found a German shepherd chained to the marina dock. He's microchipped, state K9 registry, listed as disposed from a sealed arson case. There was a beat of silence. Then Hayes said slowly, Bring me facts, not theories. I have the chip ID and clinic verification, Ethan replied. Dr. Moore is printing the file. Another pause. Ethan could hear the captain's mind working through department politics, liability, optics. When she spoke again, her tone had changed, still controlled, but heavier. Do not go freelance, Ethan, she said. If you step wrong, you'll get crushed. Sealed cases are sealed for a reason. Sometimes the reason is rot, Ethan said. Hayes exhaled, sharp, almost frustrated, but not dismissive. Meet me at the station, generators running. Bring the paperwork, and bring the dog's medical summary. We do this clean. Ethan's shoulders eased, just slightly. Copy? He hung up and looked at Lena. I'm taking him with me. Lena's eyebrows lifted. He's hypothermic and injured. I'm not leaving him alone, Ethan replied, not after what I just read. Lena studied him for a moment, then nodded as if she'd made a decision about the kind of man he was. "I'll prep a transport blanket and pain control," she said. "And Ethan—" He looked at her. Her voice softened. "If that record says disposed and he's alive, somebody's going to want him quiet again." Ethan didn't argue. He already knew. Deputy Lucas Reed met Ethan at the station bay door, cheeks red from cold, energy practically vibrating off him even at this hour. Lucas was the kind of rookie who did his job like he was trying to outrun his own nerves. Fast, eager, competent, occasionally too loud. Tonight, though, the sight of Ethan carrying a bundled German shepherd in a clinic blanket shut Lucas up instantly. "Holy—" Lucas stopped himself. "Sir, is that—" "His name is Shadow," Ethan said, "and he's evidence." Lucas blinked. "Evidence that breathes?" Ethan gave him a look. Lucas cleared his throat and stepped aside. "Right. Sorry, go. Captain's in conference." Inside, the station was dim but functional. Generator lights cast a yellowish hue over the hallway. The place smelled like coffee and wet wool. Captain Hayes stood in her office with Lena's printed pages spread across her desk. She looked up as Ethan entered, and for a second her gaze dropped to the dog. Something in her eyes softened, just a fraction, before the professional mask returned. "You're telling me this dog was officially erased," she said. "I'm telling you somebody tried to drown him tonight," Ethan replied, "and that record explains why." Hayes flipped a page. "Arson case, 3 years ago." She read silently, jaw tightening. "I remember this, the Wilcox fire, whole family. Town went feral for a culprit." Ethan nodded once. "And now the disposed K9 shows up alive on our dock." Hayes leaned back, studying him. "What do you want, Ethan?" The honest answer was simple. Justice. But Ethan had learned that saying justice out loud sounded like a slogan unless you could pay for it with proof. "I want to know who chained him there," Ethan said, "and I want to know why this file has holes big enough to drive a truck through." Hayes tapped the paperwork. "This is not enough to blow a sealed case, but it is enough to start a parallel investigation, unofficially, into current criminal conduct, attempted animal killing, evidence tampering. If we can tie that to this marina—" Ethan's gaze drifted to Shadow. The dog lay on a blanket near the heater vent, eyes half open, watching. Even sedated, he tracked the room like he was counting exits. Ethan felt the familiar internal click, commitment locking into place. "I'll start with the dock hardware," he said. "The chain, the padlock. Whoever did it bought industrial gear." Hayes's eyes narrowed. "You're thinking procurement trail." "I'm thinking people repeat themselves," Ethan said. "And whoever did this is confident. They used the blackout. They used a public dock. That means they've done it before, or they believe they can." Hayes looked toward the hallway. "Reed!" Lucas popped in like he'd been standing outside waiting. "Ma'am?" "You're with Cole," Hayes said. "You're going to be his eyes and his paperwork. He goes quiet, you keep the chain of custody loud. Understood?" Lucas straightened. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes turned back to Ethan, voice lower. "And Ethan, don't chase ghosts across the lake. I'm authorizing an investigation, not a crusade." Ethan held her gaze, calm, disciplined. "I don't do crusades," he said. "I do outcomes." Hayes nodded once as if that was the best promise she was going to get. Underscore 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 underscore. The marina in daylight looked less like a mouth and more like a wound. Power returned by late morning, but the sun did nothing to warm the air. The dockboards were still slick. The lake ice had shifted overnight, cracking in long, pale lines that ran parallel to shore like scars. Ethan and Lucas stood by the cleat where Shadow had been chained. Lucas crouched, photographing the metal, the gouge marks on the wood, the faint drag lines where a heavy body had tried to pull away. "Industrial chain," Lucas muttered. "Not the kind you buy unless you're securing, I don't know, engines, trailers." Ethan watched the dock without speaking. His mind replayed the scene, the placement near the edge, the way the chain had been wrapped with practiced speed, the padlock's quality. "You see those marks?" Ethan said. Lucas leaned in. "Yeah?" "Bolt cutters," Ethan said. "Gate chain was cut clean. Whoever brought Shadow in didn't climb over. They opened the marina and walked him down." Lucas's brow furrowed. "So they had time. They weren't panicking." "Exactly," Ethan said. Lucas photographed the cut chain at the gate. "We can run the chain manufacturer," he said. "Sometimes they stamp batch codes." Ethan nodded. He moved toward the waterline and stopped. Near the dock's base, half buried in snow, was something that didn't match the marina's weathered metal. A plastic zip tie, thick, industrial, snapped. Ethan bent, gloved fingers closing around it. He held it up. Lucas whistled under his breath. "That's not fishing gear." "No," Ethan agreed. He bagged it. Then he looked out across the lake. Wind moved over the ice in low streams, lifting powder snow into drifting ribbons. Far across the inlet sat the silhouette of the old boathouse, dark, squat, tucked under the marina's farthest pier like it was trying to hide under its own roofline. Ethan felt something shift beside him. Shadow, brought along in the back seat despite Lena's protests because Ethan refused to let him out of sight, had pushed himself upright in the SUV. His leg was bandaged, but his posture was alive now, alert. His nose pressed to the cracked window seam, drawing in air like he was reading a sentence written in scent. Then, very deliberately, Shadow let out a single, low huff. Not fear, not pain, direction. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "He's catching something." Lucas glanced between the dog and the boathouse. "You think he wants to go over there?" "I think he remembers," Ethan said. And memory, Ethan knew, was a kind of evidence, just not the kind that held up in court unless you could translate it into facts. He opened the SUV door and crouched near Shadow. "Show me," Ethan said. Shadow's amber eyes met his, and for the first time since Ethan found him, the dog's gaze wasn't just pleading or exhausted. It was focused, like a partner asking if you were ready to do the work. Ethan stood, heart steadying. "Lucas," he said, "we're going to the marina office first. Quiet questions, no sirens." Lucas nodded. "And if someone lies?" Ethan stared at the boathouse shadow under the pier. "Then we let them lie in a way that leaves fingerprints." The marina office was a one-story building with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged like it was tired of holding itself up. In summer it probably smelled like sunscreen and spilled beer. In winter it smelled like cold rot and old paperwork. Ethan and Lucas stepped inside and immediately felt the temperature change. Warmer than outdoors, but not warm in a comforting way. Warm like someone was trying to hide something with heat. A space heater sat in the corner, humming. A desk lamp cast a narrow cone of light onto a cluttered counter. Behind it, a man in a knit cap looked up from a clipboard with the defensive expression of someone who'd been startled in his own territory. "You folks open?" Lucas asked, tone friendly. The man's eyes flicked to Ethan's badge, then to the SUV outside where Shadow's silhouette sat upright. We're not really open," the man said. "Winter schedule, no slip rentals, just maintenance." Ethan nodded once, letting the man talk. "Name?" "Derek," the man said. "Derek Voss. I'm caretaker, contracted." "Who contracts you?" Ethan asked. Derek's jaw worked. "Marina board." Lucas smiled. "Board still exists? Thought it got dissolved after the flood damage 2 years back." Derek's eyes darted. "New owners, new paperwork." Ethan leaned a hip against the counter, relaxed posture that was never actually relaxed. "We had an incident last night on the dock. Dog chained up, attempted cruelty. We're collecting information." Derek's face tightened. "A dog?" Lucas leaned in slightly. "German Shepherd, big one. Someone tried to make him disappear." Derek swallowed. That's messed up." "Sure is," Ethan said. "You see anything? Hear anything? Any vehicles come through during the blackout?" Derek shook his head quickly. Too quickly. "No, I was home. Power went out. I stayed put. Roads were bad." Ethan didn't challenge him yet. He let the silence stretch, just enough that Derek had to fill it. "I mean, you know," Derek added, "people cut through here sometimes, teens, ice fishermen, but I wasn't here." Lucas's eyes flicked to the clipboard. "What you tracking there?" Derek pulled it closer instinctively. "Work orders." Ethan's gaze dropped anyway. The top sheet was a maintenance log with dates and signatures. He saw entries for generator fuel, dock reinforcement, boathouse repairs, and then a line item that didn't match winter marina upkeep. Bulk solvent delivery, Pier 4 storage. Ethan's face stayed neutral. You keep solvents on site? Derek licked his lips. For cleaning, winterizing. You know, boats. Lucas nodded like he believed it, then pointed casually with his pen. Pier 4's the far end, right? Near that old boathouse? Derek's eyes flicked again, tiny panic flash. Ethan felt Shadow's presence, even outside, like a pressure against the world. Derek cleared his throat. We store stuff out there, yeah, keeps it away from the public side. Ethan let his voice drop, calm and clinical. Derek, you're going to do yourself a favor and tell us who has keys to the gates. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. Lucas stepped closer, still friendly, but firmer. We can pull gate access, camera. No cameras, Derek blurted. Ethan's eyes sharpened. No cameras? Derek immediately regretted it. I mean, most are down. Old system. In winter, no one pays to keep them running. Ethan nodded slowly. Convenient. Derek's shoulders hunched. Look, I don't know anything about some dog. I do maintenance. That's it. Ethan didn't push further. Not yet. He'd learned long ago that you couldn't force truth out of someone who wasn't ready. You could only arrange the room so the truth had nowhere else to go. All right, Ethan said. We'll be around. Don't leave town. Derek blinked. Am I in trouble? Lucas gave a bright smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not if you're honest. They left. Outside, the wind slapped them with cold again. Shadow watched through the SUV window, ears forward, eyes tracking Ethan as he approached. Ethan opened the rear door. Shadow shifted, bandaged leg careful, but his body vibrated with intent. He leaned forward, nose working. Then he turned his head toward the far end of the marina. Pier 4. Ethan felt the old part of him, the part that hated uncertainty, settle into something cleaner. Focus. Lucas exhaled. He's pointing. He's not pointing, Ethan said quietly. He's telling. Lucas glanced back at the office. Derek's lying. Maybe, Ethan said, or maybe he's scared. Lucas rubbed his gloved hands together. So what's the move? Ethan looked down the marina walkway. The boathouse at the far end sat under the pier like a shadow under a bed. No lights, no movement, just stillness. The move, Ethan said, is we don't walk into someone else's dark without telling Captain Hayes where we are. Lucas blinked. So, caller? Ethan already had his phone out. Underscore 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 underscore. Captain Maria Hayes met them at the station, a half hour later, coat still on, hair pulled back tighter than usual. She listened while Ethan laid out the maintenance log detail, Derek's nervous behavior, and Shadow's repeated orientation toward Pier 4. Hayes's face remained unreadable, but her eyes sharpened at the words, bulk solvent delivery. Solvents are accelerant adjacent, she said, and an evidence K9 would absolutely alert on residuals. Ethan nodded. Hayes leaned forward, hands flat on her desk. You have probable cause to investigate current criminal activity, not to crack a sealed case. Understood? Yes, Ethan said. And you're not going alone, Hayes added, looking at Lucas like he was part warning, part reassurance. Reed stays with you. You document everything. You do not enter any private structure without legal coverage. Lucas straightened. Yes, ma'am. Hayes's gaze slid to Shadow, who lay near the heater vent in the corner of the office, eyes open and watching, as if he understood every word. He can't be operational, Hayes said, though there was less conviction in her voice than she probably wanted. He's injured. He's the reason we're here, Ethan replied, and he's not leaving my line of sight. Hayes held Ethan's gaze for a long moment, weighing him the way leaders did when they knew their officer was about to step into a mess. Then she nodded once. Fine. You're going back out there in daylight. You photograph Pier 4 storage. You collect samples if you find accelerants. You do it clean. Ethan's shoulders eased. Copy, Hayes added, lower. And Ethan, if there's any hint this touches the Wilcox arson, I need it rock solid. Because if you accuse the wrong person in this town, it won't just be your career. Ethan didn't ask what else it would be. He already knew. Pier 4 was colder than the rest of the marina, exposed to the open lake wind. The boards here were older, patched with mismatched planks. Ice formed in thick ridges along the edges. The far end widened into a platform that held 2 storage containers, rust-red steel boxes with padlocks and warning stickers that had been half scraped away. Ethan approached slowly. Lucas documented every step with his body cam and still photos. Shadow walked beside Ethan, bandaged leg moving stiffly but determined, harness secured. Halfway down the pier, Shadow paused. His nose dipped to the planks. He inhaled, then raised his head sharply. His body stiffened. Alert? Ethan watched carefully. Shadow's tail didn't wag. His ears didn't flick randomly. This wasn't a pet reacting to a smell. This was trained behavior, clear, deliberate. "He's got something," Lucas murmured. Ethan nodded once. He glanced around. No civilians, no obvious cameras, just lake wind and snow. He stepped to the nearest container. The lock was newer than the metal, gleaming despite the weather. Ethan crouched, flashlight beam angled. Lucas leaned in. "You gonna cut it?" "Not yet," Ethan said. "We start with what's legal." He ran his gloved fingers along the seam of the container door. The edge had faint smudges, darker than the surrounding rust. Not dirt, something oily. Shadow moved closer, nose hovering near the seam. He inhaled and gave a short, sharp huff. Lucas's eyes widened. "That's accelerant?" "Could be," Ethan said. He took out an evidence swab kit from the trunk, standard for suspicious substances, carefully swabbed the seam, sealed it, labeled it with time and location. Lucas filmed. Then Ethan turned his attention to the second container. This one had a different lock, heavier, more expensive. The warning sticker on the door read, "No smoking, flammable." Lucas exhaled. "That's not marina cleaning supplies?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "No." Shadow moved again, alerting harder now, front paws braced, body leaning forward. His breathing quickened. Ethan looked down at him. "Easy." Shadow's eyes flicked toward the underside of the pier, not the container, under. Ethan's spine stiffened. "Lucas." Lucas followed his gaze. "You think there's something under there?" Ethan didn't answer. He moved to the edge and crouched, shining his flashlight down between the support beams. Under the pier, half hidden by shadow and frozen spray, was a hatch, metal, bolted, with a handle that sat flush. Not original marina construction, too new, too clean. Ethan's heartbeat slowed, calm, focus. "That," he said, "is not in any marina blueprint." Lucas swallowed. "That's an access point." Shadow huffed again, urgent. Ethan stood. "We're not opening it without Hayes." Lucas nodded fast, relieved. "Good, because I'm not trying to be the guy who opens the secret hatch in a horror movie." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. He took photos. Lucas filmed. Ethan marked the location with GPS. Then his phone buzzed. "Hayes." Ethan answered. "We found something." "What kind of something?" Hayes asked. "A bolted hatch under Pier 4. Shadow alerted on the storage containers and the hatch." Hayes' voice sharpened. "Do not open it." "We won't," Ethan said. Hayes exhaled. "I'm sending Moore and a deputy with proper tools and a warrant request if we can justify it. Stay there. Keep it quiet." Ethan's gaze slid toward the boathouse again. Still dark. Still. But he felt it now, the sense that the marina wasn't empty. It was waiting. "Copy," Ethan said. He hung up and looked at Lucas. "We hold position." Lucas glanced around the empty docks. "Feels like we're bait." Ethan didn't deny it. "Then we stay sharp." Shadow sat beside Ethan like a statue assembled for duty. Wind lifted snow around them in thin ribbons, and the lake groaned underneath its own skin. Ethan watched the boathouse, and in his mind, something he hadn't wanted to touch began to stir: the sealed arson file, the missing pieces, the way Shadow had been marked disposed. Because the kind of people who could erase a working dog from a record could erase anything, including a family. Dr. Lena Moore arrived first, her SUV crunching over snow into the marina lot. She stepped out wearing a heavy parka and carrying a hard plastic case, field kit, gloves, sampling equipment. Her face was set, introspective focus locked in. Captain Hayes came with her, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies. Hayes's presence changed the air immediately, made it official, made it heavier. She approached Ethan, eyes scanning everything, then dropped to a crouch near the pier edge. "Show me," she said. Ethan pointed. "Under there." Hayes peered down. Jesus! Lena moved to Shadow, kneeling carefully so as not to stress his leg. She held her gloved hand under his muzzle. Shadow sniffed, then nudged her fingers gently. A quiet sign of trust. Lena's expression softened briefly. Then she stood and walked to the container seam where Ethan had swabbed. "Residual odor is strong," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "If it's gasoline, it's unusually persistent in this cold. If it's a solvent blend, it'll cling." Hayes stood. "We have enough for probable cause. We open the hatch." Ethan's posture tightened. "With you here?" Hayes nodded. "With me here." One deputy used a wrench to loosen the bolts. Metal squealed under strain. The cold made everything brittle, louder. When the last bolt came free, the hatch still didn't lift easily, as if sealed by ice or intention. Ethan stepped forward and helped. Together they pried it up. A breath of air rose from below. Not cold lake air. Warm, damp air with a chemical edge that made Ethan's nostrils flare. Lena froze, eyes narrowing. "That's fuel vapor." Hayes's voice hardened. "Lights!" Flashlights cut down into the opening. A narrow metal ladder descended into darkness, and from below, faint, almost imperceptible, came the hum of machinery. Generators, off-grid. Lucas's voice came out thin. "So, someone's down there, right now." Shadow rose, hackles lifting, and let out a low rumble that vibrated through his chest. Not barking, warning. Ethan looked at Hayes. "We're not going down blind." Hayes nodded once. "We're not." She stepped back, pulling out her radio. "Units, staging. We have probable concealed space under Pier 4. Possible accelerants present. Possible active operation. No sirens, no lights. Quiet approach." The deputies shifted, suddenly alert. Lucas swallowed hard but kept filming until Hayes shot him a look that said, "Stop documenting and start surviving." Ethan's hand rested on Shadow's harness. He felt the dog's muscles tense under his palm, ready despite the injury. Hayes looked at Ethan. "Cole, you go first with Shadow. Reed stays on your shoulder. Moore stays up top. She's not tactical." Lena didn't argue, but her eyes met Ethan's. There was worry there, and something else, the recognition that Shadow's life depended on how careful Ethan was going to be. Ethan nodded once. "Copy?" He clipped a small flashlight to his vest, checked his radio, then looked at Shadow. "Stay close," Ethan whispered. Shadow's amber eyes locked onto him. A slow blink. Then Shadow stepped toward the ladder without hesitation. Ethan followed. The ladder rungs were cold and slick. Ethan descended slowly, listening. The hum grew louder. The air thickened. At the bottom, Ethan's boots hit concrete. A corridor stretched ahead, low ceiling, industrial pipes running along it. The walls were newer than the marina above, fresh plywood panels with metal reinforcement. Someone had built this. Shadow's nose went to the floor immediately, tracking. His body moved with trained economy, despite the bandaged leg. He wasn't limping as much now, adrenaline and purpose overriding pain. Ethan held his breath, listening for human movement. There, faint voices ahead, 2, maybe 3, muffled by walls, and a clink of metal. Hayes's whisper crackled through Ethan's earpiece. "Status?" Ethan replied softly. "We're in. Corridor. Voices ahead." Lucas stayed close, breathing shallow. Ethan could feel the rookie's nerves like static, but Lucas did his job. Quiet, controlled, eyes scanning corners. Shadow stopped at a junction and lifted his head sharply. Ethan froze. A mechanical sound pulsed through the walls like a pump cycling, a rhythmic metallic clack. Shadow's ears angled toward it. His body stiffened. Lena's earlier comment echoed in Ethan's mind. Shadow reacts to specific sounds near the waterfront. This could be it. Ethan signaled Lucas to hold. He edged forward, peering around the corner. A room opened up ahead, lit by hanging work lights. A table cluttered with documents. A couple of metal drums labeled with chemical warnings. And 2 men, backs turned, loading something into a crate. Not boats, not fishing gear. Stacks of paperwork, binders, folders, envelopes marked with insurance company names. Ethan's eyes narrowed. This was not just hiding fuel. This was hiding a system. Shadow's low rumble deepened. One of the men paused. "You hear that?" Ethan's body went still. He flattened against the wall, heart steady. Lucas's breath hitched. The second man shrugged. "Probably pipes. This place is—" Shadow chose that moment to step forward. Not barking, just a soft scrape of paw on concrete. The first man turned. His eyes widened at the sight of Ethan in the doorway. "Police!" he started. Ethan moved, fast, controlled. "Hands up!" Ethan ordered, voice hard. "Now!" The men froze, startled. One reached instinctively toward his waistband. Shadow exploded into motion, lunging with perfect precision. He didn't go for the throat. He went for the arm, training. The man yelped as Shadow clamped down and pulled him off balance. The second man stumbled back, eyes wild. Lucas stepped in, weapon drawn, voice shaking, but loud enough. "On the ground! On the ground!" The second man dropped, hands up, panic making him compliant. Ethan pulled cuffs, snapped them on the first man as Shadow released and backed away, still rumbling. Hayes' voice crackled. "Contact? 2 suspects detained," Ethan said. "We found documents and chemical drums. Looks like—" He glanced at the labels. "Accelerant storage." Hayes swore under her breath. "Hold. Do not move deeper until backup is positioned." Ethan's gaze drifted past the room's far door. A faint smell drifted through the crack. Smoke, not active smoke, stale, embedded. The ghost of fire. Shadow sniffed the air and stiffened, tail rigid. Then he looked at Ethan with an intensity that felt like a shove. This wasn't the main room, this was the entryway. Whatever Shadow remembered was deeper. Ethan's muscles tightened. Every instinct in him screamed forward, but Hayes' rule stayed in his ear. "Don't go blind." He swallowed and forced himself to stay put. "Back up now," Ethan said into the radio, voice low. "This is bigger than a storage room." Hayes replied, "Copy. Units descending." Ethan looked at Shadow. The dog's chest rose and fell. He trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. Ethan understood that feeling too well. He rested his hand on Shadow's neck, steadying both of them. "I know," Ethan whispered. Shadow pressed into his palm once. Then they waited in the underground corridor while the hum of generators kept the secret alive around them. And above them, the lake kept pretending it was just a lake. Backup arrived like a change in pressure. One moment, the corridor was only Ethan, Lucas, Shadow, and the 2 cuffed men breathing too fast. The next, the low tunnel filled with the soft crunch of boots, the whisper of radios, the controlled murmur of trained people moving into formation. Captain Maria Hayes descended last, flashlight steady, pistol low but ready. Her eyes took in the scene in a single sweep. 2 suspects detained, Shadow's posture locked tight, the chemical drums, the paperwork. She didn't waste time with questions that could be answered by her own eyes. "More?" she said into her radio. "Up top," Lena's voice replied, clipped. "I have fuel vapor readings near the hatch. It's concentrated. There's active storage down there." Hayes' jaw tightened. "Understood." She stepped closer to the table and flipped open one binder without touching too much, careful not to contaminate. Lucas hovered with evidence tags already in hand, like he'd been waiting his whole life to be useful in exactly this way. Hayes scanned a page, eyes narrowing. "Insurance adjuster notes," she said. "Rebuild contracts, claim approvals. This isn't petty." Ethan watched Shadow. The dog stood angled toward the far door, nostrils flaring, ears forward, as if the rest of the room barely existed. Shadow wasn't interested in paperwork. He was interested in where the fire lived. Hayes noticed too. "He's pulling," Ethan nodded once. "He wants deeper." Hayes held Ethan's gaze. "We go one step at a time. No hero runs." Ethan's voice stayed calm. "I'm not running. I'm following evidence." Hayes' eyes flicked to Shadow. "Evidence with teeth." Shadow huffed once, like he agreed. Hayes turned to one of the deputies. "Take these 2 up. Secure them. Reed, you're documenting everything we touch. Cole, your point. Shadow stays tight. If we see civilians, we prioritize extraction. If we see ignition sources, we neutralize. Understood?" A chorus of quiet, "Yes, ma'am," answered. Ethan felt something in him click into place, an old rhythm he'd been living without. Not the chaos of combat. The calm of coordinated action, the way a team moved when people trusted each other. They approached the far door. It was metal, reinforced, with a keypad, not marina grade. Hayes' eyebrows lifted. Who's paying for this kind of security? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. Shadow sniffed the seam, then stepped back, body tense. Ethan leaned close. He could smell it more clearly now, stale smoke embedded in the metal, mixed with a sharp chemical sweetness that turned his stomach. Accelerant. Lucas whispered, Feels like we're stepping into the mouth of something. Ethan's voice was almost too quiet to hear. We already did. Hayes signaled a deputy forward with a breaching tool. The deputy wedged it into the door seam and applied controlled force. Metal screamed softly. The keypad flashed once, then went dead. The door gave. Cold air rushed out from the other side, different from the damp warmth of the corridor. This air was dry, acrid, and it carried an echo. Not sound echo. Space echo, a larger area. Ethan stepped through first, flashlight sweeping. The room beyond was bigger than he expected, an underground warehouse carved beneath the marina like a second skeleton. Steel beams held the ceiling. Work lights hung in rows, extension cords snaked across the floor like veins, and everywhere, supplies that didn't belong here. Stacks of drywall, pallets of insulation, containers of industrial solvent, boxes labeled with electrical components, rolls of copper wiring, a rebuild supply cache. In the center was a long workbench with charred fragments laid out like trophies, burnt door handles, melted plastic, pieces of smoke detectors. Evidence. Somebody was keeping evidence. Shadow moved forward, slow and deliberate. His nose skimmed the floor, then lifted sharply toward the workbench. He let out a low rumble that vibrated in his chest. Hayes stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the charred items. "This looks like post-fire salvage," she said. Ethan's throat tightened. "Like someone keeps souvenirs." Lucas swallowed audibly. Then Ethan's flashlight beam hit a wall-mounted board. Photographs, pinned in neat rows. Not family photos, not casual pictures. Scene photos, houses burned, blackened frames, ash-covered toys, the hollow mouths of windows. Each photo had a date and a claim number written beneath it. Ethan felt something cold spread behind his ribs. Hayes's face hardened. "This is an arson pipeline." Lucas whispered, "They're staging fires, then rebuilding, then laundering through the contracts." Ethan's gaze slid to Shadow again. Shadow had moved past the workbench toward a side corridor, body tense. He paused at the corridor entrance and looked back at Ethan once, eyes bright with insistence. Not curiosity. Urgency. Ethan followed. The corridor was narrower, lined with storage cages, wire enclosures stacked like shelves. Some were empty, some held equipment. One held dog gear, harnesses, leashes, a muzzle. And then Ethan saw something that made his chest tighten. A metal crate. Not a dog crate. A K-9 transport crate, the kind used in official vehicles. It sat shoved against the wall, dented at the corner like it had been dropped. Shadow approached it and stopped. His body trembled, his nose pressed to the metal seam. He inhaled, then let out a sound Ethan had never heard from him before. Half whine, half growl. Pain. Memory. Ethan crouched beside him. "What happened to you?" he murmured. Shadow nudged the crate with his muzzle. Then he turned and pushed down the corridor again. Hayes hovered behind them, voice low. "Cole, what is he doing?" Ethan didn't look away from Shadow. "He's remembering the route." They reached a second door, this one wooden, reinforced with metal bands. It had scorch marks around the frame, as if heat had licked it before. Shadow sat in front of it and stared. Alert posture. Ethan felt his pulse kick. "There's something in there?" Hayes nodded. "Breach." A deputy pushed the door open carefully. Light spilled into a small room, and the smell hit Ethan like a punch. Ash, burnt fabric, old smoke. On a table in the center of the room sat a cardboard box. Inside it, sealed in evidence bags, were items that looked like they belonged in a family home. A child's bracelet. A singed stuffed animal. A scorched family photo frame, glass shattered, the image inside half blackened. Lucas's voice came out thin. That's from the Wilcox case." Hayes froze. Her face tightened in anger and disbelief. "How do you know?" she asked. Lucas gestured helplessly. I remember the news photos. The bear, they showed it." Ethan stared at the box, feeling something heavy press down behind his eyes. He hadn't known the Wilcox family, but he knew what it felt like to see innocent things destroyed. Shadow stepped into the room, limped to the table, and lifted his head. He sniffed the evidence bags, then turned and stared at Ethan, as if saying, "This is why they tried to erase me." Ethan's jaw clenched. "They kept the family's belongings," he said softly, "like trophies." Hayes's voice went cold. "This is beyond insurance fraud." Ethan nodded. "This is ritual." Hayes took a breath, steadying herself. "We need names." Ethan's eyes scanned the room. There was a file cabinet in the corner, locked. Ethan moved to it, checked the lock. Cheap. He pried it open with controlled force. The drawer slid out. Inside were folders labeled with addresses and dates. He flipped through quickly, careful not to disturb too much. Then he saw it, a folder marked Wilcox. His stomach tightened. Hayes stepped beside him, took the folder without hesitation, and opened it. Inside was a printed report, typed, official-looking, with signatures. At the top, subject, K9 shadow, behavioral instability, disposition, recommendation. Hayes's eyes narrowed. This is the justification. Ethan read over her shoulder. The report described aggression and unreliable alerts. It claimed Shadow had become dangerous after the fire scene, attempting to bite an investigator. Ethan's gaze slid to Shadow, who stood in the doorway, posture-controlled, aggression or truth. Hayes flipped another page. A second report. Transfer request denied, then disposal authorized. No euthanasia certificate, no shelter transfer, no handler signature, just an authorization. Hayes's face went hard. This isn't a mistake. Ethan's voice stayed level. It's a cover. Lucas looked nauseous. Hayes closed the folder slowly. We have enough to crack this open, but we need to do it right. Every document, every drum, every photo, everything. If we step wrong, these people walk. Ethan nodded. So we don't step wrong. Hayes turned to the deputies. Secure the perimeter. Nobody comes down here without gloves and evidence protocol. Reed, start tagging. Cole, she paused, eyes shifting to Shadow. Take Shadow back up. He's exposed to fumes and he's injured. Ethan hesitated. Shadow's head lifted as if he understood the word up and disliked it. Hayes's voice softened slightly. Cole, he did his job. Now he needs to survive the aftermath. Ethan exhaled. The old part of him, the part that refused to let partners go, bristled. But Hayes was right. Ethan knelt beside Shadow and placed his palm against the dog's neck. Shadow's fur was warm under the harness, but his breathing had sped up from the fumes. You did good, Ethan murmured. You did exactly what you were trained to do. Shadow stared at him, amber eyes steady. Ethan's throat tightened. And I'm not letting anyone erase you again. Shadow leaned into his hand once, then allowed Ethan to guide him back toward the ladder. As they climbed out of the hatch, the cold air hit Ethan's face like a reset. Above, Lena waited with her kit and a worried expression. She looked down at Shadow immediately. He's breathing faster, she said. Ethan nodded. He got us into a fume-heavy space. Lena knelt and checked Shadow's gums, eyes, pulse. Her hands were steady, but her face tightened. He needs clean air, she said, and rest. His leg, too. He pushed it. Hayes emerged behind them, her face set like stone. Moore, Hayes said, I want those drum contents analyzed today. If it's accelerant, I want lab confirmed. Lena nodded. I'll run it. Hayes turned to Ethan. Cole, this is going to get ugly. Whoever built that underground operation didn't do it alone. Ethan's gaze slid to the marina office building again. Derek Voss, caretaker, nervous. We start with the keys, Ethan said. Hayes nodded once. We do. Derek Voss was gone by the time they returned to the marina office. The desk lamp was off. The space heater unplugged. The clipboard missing. The back door hung slightly ajar, snow blowing in. Lucas cursed under his breath. He ran. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't run blind. He ran with knowledge. Hayes stared at the empty office, face hard. Set an APB, quietly, no public panic. Lucas was already on his radio. Ethan stepped outside and scanned the parking lot. Fresh tire tracks cut through the snow, leading out toward the back service road that wrapped around the lake. Shadow, resting in the SUV, lifted his head and sniffed sharply. Then he growled, low, deep. Ethan felt the shift instantly. Someone's close, he murmured. Hayes stepped beside him, hand near her weapon. Where? Shadow's ears angled toward the boathouse again. Ethan followed his line of attention. At the far end of the marina, under the pier, a figure moved, just a silhouette slipping between shadows, moving toward the boathouse door. Ethan's spine stiffened. Movement at the boathouse. Hayes's voice was clipped. Units, converge quietly. Cole, hold. Ethan didn't move yet. He watched the silhouette. The figure paused at the boathouse door, pulled something from a pocket. Keys. Then slipped inside. Ethan's pulse hammered once. Hayes looked at him. You're not going in alone. Ethan's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. I'm not going in at all, unless we have reason. Hayes nodded. We have reason. That underground space connects to the boathouse. That person is either retrieving evidence or lighting a match. Lena's voice cut in tight. Captain, if they ignite solvents in that underground space, it could take the whole marina, Hayes finished. Ethan's jaw clenched. The wind picked up off the lake, and the old dock groaned again, like the town was warning them. Hayes's eyes flashed. We move! They advanced down the marina walkway in a controlled line, Hayes and Ethan at the front, Lucas behind, deputies flanking. Shadow stayed in the SUV per Lena's insistence, but Ethan could feel the dog's eyes on his back even from a distance, like an anchor pulling him true. The boathouse door was half-rotted wood with metal reinforcement strips, cheap security trying to look like expensive security. Hayes signaled a deputy. The deputy tried the handle, locked. Hayes's gaze met Ethan's. Breach! The deputy raised the tool, and from inside, a faint sound. A click, not a lock. A lighter. Ethan's body moved without thought. He shoved past the deputy and slammed his shoulder into the door. Wood cracked. The latch gave. Hayes swore and surged with him. They burst inside. The boathouse was dark except for a single lantern on the floor. The air stank of fuel. A man stood near a stack of solvent drums, lighter in his hand, eyes wide in panic. Derek Voss. He froze at the sight of them, lighter flame trembling. Don't, Ethan said, voice sharp. Drop it. Derek's lips pulled back. You don't understand. Hayes stepped forward, weapon trained. Drop it now. Derek's eyes flicked around like a trapped animal. His hand trembled. I'm not going to prison, he spat. I'm not. Ethan's gaze locked onto the drums. If that flame hit vapor? Derek, Ethan said, voice dropping into something colder, steadier. If you light that, you're not dying alone. Derek's breath hitched. Then, outside, a low, furious bark erupted. Shadow. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. In the next heartbeat, Shadow appeared, bandaged leg and all, charging into the boathouse like a missile. Lena must have opened the SUV to stop him from stressing, and he'd taken it as permission. Shadow launched at Derek's arm. The lighter flew. The flame arced, and Hayes dove, slamming her glove down over it, crushing it against the wet wood floor before it could find vapor. Ethan grabbed Derek by the collar and drove him into the wall, hard enough to rattle old boards. Deputies swarmed, cuffs snapping shut. Derek screamed, thrashing, but Shadow stood between Derek and the drums, body rigid, growling low like a warning system that had decided it would rather die than let fire happen again. Ethan's breath came fast. Hayes rose, chest heaving, eyes blazing. You almost killed half this town. Derek spat blood. You think I'm the big one? He hissed. I'm nothing. You don't even know who you're chasing. Ethan's voice went quiet. Then tell me. Derek laughed, high and broken. You think it's just insurance? You think it's just money? It's power. It's... Hayes snapped. Name. Derek's eyes flicked to Shadow, fear and hate, mixing. That dog ruined everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. Name. Derek's lips trembled. Raymond. Hayes froze. Raymond who? Derek swallowed, then whispered it like it burned. Raymond Cole. Ethan felt the name land in his chest like a stone. Cole. Not his family name, but the coincidence made it feel personal anyway. Hayes's face went dark. Where is he? Derek smiled through blood. He's not here. He never gets his hands dirty. Ethan's gaze slid to Shadow, whose growl had softened into a steady rumble, as if the dog was listening too. Hayes leaned closer, voice ice. Where does he go when he runs? Derek's smile cracked. Across the lake, private cabin. You'll never reach him in this storm. Outside, wind slammed into the boathouse walls. Snow hissed against the windows. Ethan's eyes narrowed. We'll reach him. Hayes straightened. Units, we have a primary. Raymond Cole, possible flight to lakeside cabin. We move now. Lucas swallowed hard. In this weather? Hayes's gaze cut to him. If we wait, he burns evidence or vanishes. This is our window. Ethan's hand rested briefly on Shadow's harness. The dog's chest rose and fell, eyes bright, alive, and for a second, Ethan saw something deeper than training. Purpose. Shadow wasn't just reacting, he was leading them to the man who tried to erase him. Ethan's voice was low. We go. The lake didn't forgive impatience. By the time they loaded into the SUVs, the wind had shifted, turning sharp and relentless. Snow came sideways now, cutting visibility down to a moving wall of white. Headlights became suggestion rather than certainty. Captain Maria Hayes took lead vehicle. Ethan followed close behind in the second SUV, Shadow secured in the back, despite Lena's protests, and despite Shadow's clear resistance to being left behind. He should not be running into another exposure, Lena had insisted. Ethan had looked at her, calm and unyielding. He's not running into anything. He's staying with me. Shadow had climbed into the SUV on his own. Now he stood in the back compartment, braced against the movement, eyes locked forward as if he could see through steel and snow. Lucas rode shotgun beside Ethan, jaw tight. Private cabin across the lake, Lucas muttered. Does that mean we're crossing ice? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He studied the map display on the dash, then glanced at the lake. Raymond's cabin wasn't accessible by direct shoreline road. It sat on a narrow peninsula that cut into the lake from the opposite side. In summer, boats. In winter, snowmobiles. And sometimes trucks, if you knew the thickness of the ice. Raymond won't use the main road, Ethan said finally. Too visible. He'll cut across the inlet. Lucas's face paled slightly. In this? Ethan's voice stayed even. He's done it before. Shadow shifted in the back and let out a low huff. Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror. The dog's ears were angled forward, body tense. He knows the route, Ethan murmured. Lucas looked back at Shadow. You think he was taken across the lake before? Ethan's jaw tightened. I think that underground corridor didn't connect to the water for decoration. Hayes's voice crackled over the radio. All units, maintain spacing. Ice conditions unstable near mid-inlet. We approach from East Ridge access. Ethan's eyes narrowed. East Ridge access meant a winding forest road that would bring them down behind the peninsula. Slower, but safer. Raymond, on the other hand, might not choose safe. The convoy turned off the waterfront road and climbed into the pines. Branches scraped against metal. Snow churned under tires. The world became narrow and hostile. Lucas broke the silence. Sir, you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't found him? Ethan's gaze stayed on the road. Yes. And? He'd be at the bottom of the lake. Lucas swallowed. And we'd never know. Ethan's voice was flat. That's the point. Silence returned. Halfway down the ridge road, Hayes's voice cut in sharply. Cole, visual on fresh tire tracks cutting off toward the lake. He didn't take the ridge. Ethan felt the decision crystallize. He's on the ice, Ethan said. Hayes replied instantly. Negative. We stay ridge. Ethan's eyes flicked to the slope through the trees. Between trunks he could see faint twin lines etched across the lake surface, dark grooves through snow. Raymond had gone straight. Shadow began pacing in the back compartment, restless. Ethan's grip tightened on the wheel. Captain, he said calmly, if we stay ridge, he reaches the cabin before we do. And if you go on that ice, you don't reach anything, Hayes snapped. Ethan breathed once, slow, controlled. Then he looked in the mirror at Shadow. The dog had stopped pacing. He stood braced, eyes burning into Ethan's reflection. No fear, just focus. Ethan felt the answer settle into place. Lucas, he said quietly, seatbelt tight. Lucas's eyes widened. Sir? Ethan eased the SUV off the ridge road. Hayes's voice exploded through the radio. Cole! But Ethan was already descending the slope, tires sliding slightly before catching. The lake surface loomed ahead, white, flat, deceptively calm. He didn't accelerate recklessly. He rolled onto it slowly, feeling for resistance, listening to the vibration through the steering column. Ice groaned faintly under weight. Lucas's breathing became audible. Sir, this is... Controlled, Ethan said. Shadow braced, claws digging into rubber matting. The SUV moved across the inlet, following Raymond's tire tracks. Snow gusts swept across the surface, half erasing them already. Ahead, through the shifting white, a dark shape moved. Headlights. Raymond's truck. He was halfway across the inlet, angling toward the peninsula. Ethan's pulse steadied. Distance closing. Raymond must have seen them too, because his truck fishtailed slightly, then accelerated. Lucas muttered, He's gunning it. He thinks speed beats physics, Ethan said. The lake answered with a deep rolling crack somewhere to their left. Lucas flinched. Shadow barked once, sharp, warning. Ethan adjusted slightly, steering to keep weight distributed evenly, not cutting too sharply. The distance shrank. Raymond's truck hit a patch of rough ice and skidded sideways, tires spinning. He corrected, barely. Snow intensified, swallowing visibility in pulses. "Captain," Ethan said into the radio, voice steady despite Hayes' earlier protest. "We have visual. Mid-inlet. He's losing traction." Hayes' reply came strained. "You are off-grid, Cole." "Understood," Ethan said. Shadow shifted again, then lunged toward the back door as if he could burst through it by will alone. "Easy," Ethan muttered. Raymond's truck veered suddenly left, cutting toward a darker patch near the inlet center. Ethan's eyes sharpened. Darker meant thinner. "Idiot," he whispered. Lucas saw it too. "Sir, that ice—" A thunderous crack split the air. Raymond's truck front end dropped. The hood dipped violently as ice gave way beneath the weight. Water exploded upward in a violent spray. Raymond slammed the accelerator in panic, rear tires spinning, but the front half of the truck had already broken through. Ethan's SUV was still moving. He braked immediately, hard but controlled. "Out!" he snapped. Lucas didn't argue. They exited into screaming wind. Ice groaned underfoot. Raymond's truck tilted forward, nose submerged, rear end rising at a terrifying angle. Raymond was inside, scrambling, pounding against the driver's door as freezing water surged into the cab. Ethan's mind moved fast. Distance to truck, 30 yards. Ice condition, compromised around impact zone. Time before full submersion, seconds. Shadow barked again, furious, insistent. Ethan looked at him once. "No," Ethan said automatically. Shadow ignored him. The dog leapt from the SUV and sprinted across the ice toward the sinking truck. "Shadow!" Lucas yelled. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Shadow didn't run straight toward the hole. He arced slightly, angling around the cracking zone, instinct guiding him. Raymond managed to kick his door open, but it jammed halfway under pressure. Water filled the cab. Shadow reached the truck and launched onto the tilted rear bed, claws scraping metal. He barked directly at Raymond, teeth bared. Not attack, but command. Raymond looked up through the window, eyes wide with animal terror. Ethan ran. Each step felt like a negotiation with the lake. Ice popped under his boots, cracks spiderwebbing outward. "Don't get close to the fracture!" Lucas shouted behind him. Ethan reached the truck's rear corner just as it lurched lower. Shadow had climbed onto the roof, braced near the rear window, barking in Raymond's face. "Out!" Ethan roared. "Climb!" Raymond clawed his way through the half-open door, scrambling onto the slanted hood, then slipping as his boots lost traction on ice-slick metal. The truck shifted again. The front end dropped another foot. Shadow shifted position, moving higher along the roofline, giving Raymond space to climb. Raymond grabbed the edge of the roof and hauled himself up just as the truck's nose disappeared completely beneath the surface. Ethan reached them, grabbing Raymond by the jacket collar. Ice cracked loudly beneath all three. "Move!" Ethan barked. Shadow leapt off first, landing on solid ice beyond the immediate fracture zone. Ethan yanked Raymond off the sinking truck and dragged him sideways, not back the way they came, but diagonally, spreading weight. The truck slid fully under with a violent surge, water splashing upward, then sealing partially with floating shards. The lake roared and settled into new cracks. Ethan and Raymond hit the ice hard, sliding. Lucas reached them seconds later, grabbing Raymond's arm and hauling. Raymond sobbed, half-choked, water freezing instantly to his clothes. Shadow stood 3 feet away, chest heaving, eyes locked on Raymond. Not mercy, not hate. Recognition. Raymond looked at the dog, and something in his face changed. Fear turned into something like understanding. "You," Raymond whispered through chattering teeth, "you weren't unstable." Shadow growled low. Ethan rolled Raymond onto his stomach and snapped cuffs on with practiced precision. "You staged fires," Ethan said quietly. "You buried evidence. You tried to drown him." Raymond's laugh was brittle and broken. "You think I built that alone?" Ethan's voice stayed level. "You'll have plenty of time to tell us who helped." Hayes' SUV lights flickered through the snow from the ridge road as backup repositioned to reach them safely. Ethan finally allowed himself to breathe fully. He turned to Shadow. The dog stood steady, though his injured leg trembled from strain. Frost clung to his fur, but his eyes were alive. Ethan stepped closer and rested his forehead briefly against Shadow's. "You did it again," he murmured. Shadow exhaled, warm breath fogging between them. Raymond watched, shivering violently. "You should have let me drown," he muttered. Ethan stood slowly, gaze steady. "No," he said, "I don't let partners drown, and I don't let suspects either." Hayes reached them moments later, breath visible, eyes sharp as she assessed the scene. "Everybody intact?" she demanded. "Suspect secured," Ethan replied. "Truck lost." Hayes looked toward the dark hole in the ice where the lake swallowed evidence. "Divers when conditions improve," she said. "We'll get it back." Raymond sagged in the deputy's grip. Hayes's gaze slid to him, cold and unwavering. "You tried to burn a marina and drown a witness." Raymond's eyes flicked to Shadow again. "He was never supposed to survive," Raymond whispered. Shadow's growl deepened. Ethan's voice was calm, lethal in its steadiness. "He did." Snow continued to fall, erasing the chaos slowly. But the damage was done, and this time it was documented. They transported Raymond back up the ridge, leaving the lake to groan in the dark behind them. Inside the heated station holding room, Raymond sat wrapped in emergency blankets, wrists cuffed to a steel ring on the bench. He looked smaller now, less powerful, but not empty. Hayes stood across from him, file in hand. "You're going to tell me everything," she said. Raymond laughed weakly. "You think this ends with me?" Ethan stood beside Hayes, silent. Raymond's eyes flicked between them. "You reopen Wilcox," he said softly. "You reopen more than you can handle." Hayes's expression didn't change. "Try me." Raymond leaned back, defeated. Shadow lay outside the holding room, resting but alert, as if he knew that whatever happened next would finally correct the record written about him. Ethan looked down at him and felt something shift fully into place inside his chest. Not rage, not grief. Purpose. The kind that didn't burn hot and reckless. The kind that stayed. The storm broke before dawn. Not all at once, not dramatically. The wind simply tired of fighting and dropped to a low whisper through the pines. Snow settled into stillness. The lake, scarred by cracks and the dark wound where Raymond's truck had gone under, lay quiet beneath a pale gray sky. Inside Pine Creek Sheriff's Station, the lights hummed steadily again. Generators were no longer necessary. The town had power. And for the first time in a long while, it also had answers. Underscore, 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 underscore. Raymond talked. Not because he wanted redemption, because he understood leverage. He sat across from Captain Maria Hayes in interview room 2, hands cuffed to the table, eyes bloodshot but calculating. Ethan stood against the back wall, silent. Shadow lay just outside the door, within sightline, as if guarding the truth itself. Raymond's voice had lost its arrogance. "It started small," he said. "Fire-damaged properties, insurance payouts, rebuild contracts. We were just cutting the middle." Hayes didn't blink. "We?" Raymond exhaled slowly. "Investors, contractors, adjusters who didn't look too close." "Names," Hayes said. Raymond smirked faintly. "You'll get them, but you won't like what you find." Ethan finally spoke, voice low and even. "And the Wilcox fire?" Raymond's eyes flickered. "That wasn't supposed to escalate," he muttered. "Accelerant spread faster than predicted. They were supposed to be out of town." Hayes's jaw tightened. "They weren't." Raymond didn't answer. Ethan's voice didn't rise. "And Shadow?" Raymond looked toward the door, toward the dog lying calmly beyond it. "He alerted," Raymond said quietly. "Wouldn't stop, wouldn't back down. Your department wanted closure. We gave them a reason." Hayes went still. "You fabricated a behavioral instability report," she said. Raymond's lips curled faintly. "We suggested one." "And the handler?" Ethan asked. Raymond hesitated. "Transfer request denied," he said. "Handler got reassigned, dog marked unfit." "And disposed?" Hayes pressed. Raymond shrugged weakly. "Off the books. Sold him off. Thought someone would put him down. Didn't matter. We just needed him gone." Ethan felt the old anger stir, but it didn't control him. It sharpened him. Raymond leaned back. "You think this ends with me?" he repeated. "Insurance money runs through politics. Contractors fund campaigns. You're pulling a thread." Hayes's voice was steady as steel. "Then we'll see how much thread there is." By noon, Pine Creek wasn't quiet anymore. News vans lined Main Street. Reporters clustered outside the station. Word spread fast in a small town, faster when it involved arson, fraud, and the near destruction of a marina. But what people talked about most wasn't the paperwork. It was the dog, the one who'd survived the lake, the one who'd led officers underground, the one who'd stopped a man from lighting a match. Shadow lay on a thick wool blanket in the station hallway, IV reattached for hydration, leg rewrapped. Dr. Lena Moore sat beside him, hand resting gently against his shoulder. "He shouldn't have run like that," she murmured. Ethan crouched on Shadow's other side. "He would have anyway," Ethan said. Lena glanced at him. "You would have too." Ethan didn't deny it. Shadow lifted his head slightly and rested his chin against Ethan's knee. His amber eyes weren't frantic anymore. They were clear, present, like something that had been unfinished was finally complete. Captain Hayes stepped into the hallway, file in hand. "It's official," she said. Ethan looked up. "The Wilcox case is reopened," Hayes continued. "State's attorney is reviewing every document. The fabricated behavioral report is flagged as tampered evidence." Lena exhaled softly. Hayes looked down at Shadow. "And as of this morning," she added, "Shadow's designation has been corrected." Ethan's chest tightened. "Corrected how?" he asked. Hayes allowed herself the smallest hint of a smile. "Reinstated, honorably." Shadow's ears twitched at the shift in tone. Lena smiled fully now. "About time," she said. 2 weeks later, the lake looked different. Not because the ice had melted, it hadn't, but because the town did. The marina was closed pending structural review. The underground space had been fully documented and sealed. Investigators from outside the county worked quietly through financial trails that extended far beyond Pine Creek. Raymond remained in custody. More arrests were coming. But for the first time, Ethan didn't feel the weight of unfinished business pressing on him. He stood at the edge of his own property, just beyond town limits, a small stretch of land bordered by pines and sloping gently toward the forest. Shadow stood beside him, leg stronger now, bandage gone. A faint limp remained, but Lena assured him it would fade with time. Lucas approached from behind, boots crunching through thawing snow. "You're really doing this?" Lucas asked. Ethan looked over the land. Old fencing lay half-collapsed along one side. A storage shed leaned slightly, wood warped by seasons. It wasn't much, but it was space. "There are dogs like him out there," Ethan said quietly. "Working dogs, evidence dogs, service dogs. When politics gets messy, they get discarded." Lucas nodded slowly. "And you want to build what, a shelter?" Ethan shook his head once. "Not a shelter," he said. "A reset." Shadow glanced up at him. Ethan rested a hand on the dog's neck. "A place where working dogs can retrain, heal, and get reassigned properly, where they don't disappear into paperwork." Lucas's eyes softened. "You got a name?" he asked. Ethan looked across the land, feeling the wind move lightly through branches. "Second watch," he said. Lucas smiled. "That's good." Shadow huffed once, as if approving. Spring arrived slowly. Snow receded in patches, revealing dark soil and stubborn shoots of green. Volunteers from town showed up on weekends, people who had watched the news and wanted to be part of something that felt honest. Lena brought medical supplies and helped set up a small treatment room inside the refurbished shed. Lucas hauled lumber and nearly smashed his thumb twice before learning how to swing a hammer properly. Captain Hayes visited once, hands in her coat pockets, surveying the progress. "You're building a liability nightmare," she said dryly. Ethan almost smiled. "I'm building oversight," he replied. Hayes watched Shadow move across the yard, greeting a young German shepherd recently transferred from another county, nervous, pacing, eyes uncertain. Shadow approached slowly. No aggression, no dominance display. Just steady presence. The younger dog hesitated, then leaned in. Shadow stood firm, grounded. Hayes exhaled softly. "He's leading," she said. Ethan nodded. "He always was." The Wilcox family's belongings were returned to surviving relatives. The official statement corrected the record. The fire had been intentionally set as part of a larger fraud network. The K-9 assigned to the case had performed accurately and had been improperly removed from duty. Shadow's name appeared in that report, not as unstable, as reliable. Ethan watched the news clip once, alone on his porch, Shadow's head heavy on his thigh. "You cleared your name," Ethan murmured. Shadow's tail thumped lightly. Ethan stared out at the trees. "You cleared mine, too." Because somewhere along the way, between the lake and the underground corridor and the cracking ice, Ethan had stopped carrying the quiet doubt he'd held since leaving service. He didn't need chaos to define him. He needed purpose. Shadow shifted closer. Ethan rested his palm on the dog's fur. "Second watch," he said softly. "We start here." Shadow exhaled, content. The wind moved gently through the pines. The lake, far beyond the trees, lay calm and unthreatening under the first true blue sky of the season. Truth had survived the attempt to bury it, and loyalty had refused to drown.